And our guest today is inspiring, isn't he?
Yeah, I'm just meeting Jason today for the first time, um, and I think it's fascinating because he is a unicorn of unicorns. You know I'm my knowledge of HPV is somewhat limited. It's not something I've treated in my career, but it's common. It's something we all learn about, and Jason is a rarity. You know that you typically hear about HPV as being related to cervical cancer in women. Um, but it's actually, one of the leading causes of oral pharyngeal cancer in all cases, but men in particular. So, Jason, welcome and thank you for coming on and sharing your story. I'm curious to see how this all came to be and how you discovered it and then subsequently were treated and thank God you're doing great. So, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I look forward to sharing more about my story, my journey, and how I became um, fairly well known within the head and neck cancer advocacy community.
Great. So when did this all start? This was you lived your life, everything was normal, you didn't know you had HPV as often as the case. What was your first indication that you might have an issue?
Now, let me first tell you that I knew nothing about HPV in 2014, like very little. I knew it had something to do with cervical cancer, but that is all I knew.
Hmm.
I was 44. I was like any other busy person, right? My kids were young. We were going to sporting events on weekends. I was working 50 to 70 hours a week in our family business, date night once a week. And I was taking a financial exam for my family business. We appraise life insurance. And I was there and I put my hand, back then I had hair and no beard, just so you know, this happened during COVID. But I put my hand on my face to ponder a question, moved my hand onto my neck, and I felt a small bump. And that was it. I literally had no symptoms. And at that time, I didn't know what that was. And so as I finished taking the test, I went and saw my dad, who's a doctor locally here in Orlando, and I said, "Hey, what is this?" And he's like, touched it, and I didn't know what he was doing. And he's like, "Let's call the ear, nose, and throat doctor," because my dad has been a doctor here for decades.
Yeah.
I'm a dermatologist, thank goodness. And so we called the ENT, and he said, "Hey, you don't smoke, you don't drink heavily. Come see me in a few weeks." And this was a Thursday, and I'm like, "Great, I'll be there on Monday." Because I'm a guy that goes to the doctor, and I always tell people that's like the one thing that I try to tell guys all the time. Don't be so manly.
Oh,
Go to the doctor, right?
absolutely. That's you're preaching to the choir. We promote that all the time. Men don't take care of themselves. That's part of our mission.
It's a problem, right? So I go to the doctor, they look at my neck and they're like, "Hey, it's likely nothing. We'll put you on 10 days of antibiotics and steroids, and the slight chance it doesn't go away, we'll immediately schedule you for a needle biopsy and CAT scan." Now, I have to tell you, I'd gone from 228 weight to 208 down to 188. I was the healthiest I'd felt in years. I did not even hear that last part. I thought, great, antibiotics. So I
Yeah.
went on antibiotics. 2 days later, left for the Florida Keys, where I ran the equivalent. I ran a 5K basically, partied with friends. That Sunday, flew from the Keys to Washington, D.C., where I lobbied on Capitol Hill for the insurance industry for my business. Wednesday, flew home. Thursday, CAT scan. Friday, needle biopsy. Monday, stage 4, HPV related tonsil cancer.
Wow.
And
So this
so,
this is within a month. This
oh
whole.
yeah, I mean, it was weird, to be honest. I mean, cancer was something that other people got.
Hmm.
It wasn't, it never knocked on our door before, right? So obviously, I'm sure you talk about this, but cancer doesn't care how wealthy you are. It doesn't care white, black, Christian, Jewish. It does not care. It's just cancer, right? It shows up everywhere. Um, I want to not to mislead anyone. So when I say stage 4 HPV related tonsil cancer, I learned had I been diagnosed at the end of 17, beginning of 18, I would have been stage 1. But 11 years ago, because of the path that the cancer took, I was stage 4. So I find out that I need a radical tonsillectomy, neck dissection. I had 42 lymph nodes removed from my neck. I have a scar that goes from the bottom of my right ear to the center of my throat. It's on the scar line, I mean, on the line of my neck crease. So can't see it as much anymore.
Hmm.
And then I had 7 weeks of chemo, radiation, and a feeding tube.
Wow. Talk about 0 to 90 in 3.2 seconds from healthy to major cancer treatment. That's well, it's fantastic that you found it so early. Like, explain that a little bit about the stages. Tell me that again.
Yeah, and and I'd like to go back anyway because so they do this needle biopsy, CAT scan, the whole thing. Um, and I will share this with you, but without giving too much detail so I don't get anyone in trouble. And Neil, you're going to be like, Jason, you should have told me this before. Um, I'm pretty persistent. And what happened actually was I had my needle biopsy and CAT scan. I called the hospital all weekend and I'm like, did the results come in? Did the results come in? Did the results come in? And they're like, finally, they came in. Monday morning, I'm standing in my living room and they're like, yes, the results just came in. I say, great. Can you fax them to my doctor? I don't know if I should say this. You might want to cut this, and I gave them my e-fax because I thought I know how to read a path report. My job, my whole life was working with my dad, his dermatology practice. I can read no cancer. Like I can read it.
Yeah.
So I'm standing in my living room. The path report comes in and it says tonsil cancer. And I'm like, I can't believe if this is real, I have cancer. So I send the e-fax, I forward it to my father, and he answers the phone. I'm like, hey, Dad, I need you to look at your email. He goes, what is it? I go, I think I may have cancer. And it was the weirdest thing, right? I'm telling my dad I have cancer. I'm the
Right.
oldest of four kids, and everyone knows that parents love their oldest son the most or daughter. And so I knew it was going to be heartbreaking to him that I'm telling him that I have cancer. But so he says, and I'll never forget, he opens the path report and he says, looks like it. And I will tell you, I then had to show up to the doctor, pretend like I didn't know that I had cancer already. And and the doctor tells me, and reality is it's scary, right? At the end of the day, you feel as healthy as you've ever felt. I've never heard of it before, right?
Hmm.
It's not like prostate cancer. And when I say this to you, I'm not minimizing breast cancer, prostate cancer, pancreatic cancer, lung cancer. Like everyone knows someone who has had those cancers.
Right.
I get HPV related tonsil cancer, and I'm like, I literally don't know what this is. And I've been raised in a medical family for decades.
That's what I'm telling you. My first statement to you is that, you're a unicorn. This is a rare thing. And it's, HPV is once again, like I said, a lot of our theme is, how men's treatment, how men's healthcare varies from women and is often on the second tier. Women's health seems to be in everyone's mind, but for men to have throat cancer, you're right. It's tobacco related, it's drinking related. So then to throw, a throat cancer that's HPV related, which is also typically thought of as a female disease with cervical cancer. So, you are a rarity. Now, do you feel like you felt the bump? Now, do they think it had been present for years before that? What
Yeah,
what
so
what are some of the thoughts?
I should have said from the beginning, I'm 100% not a doctor, and you'll soon realize that by the way I describe what I'm about to describe. So they tell me I have this diagnosis, and I say, well, how? What is this? Tell me about it.
Right.
And hopefully this is okay to say, not it's PG still, or maybe.
Yeah, we're
But they
good.
say that the oral sex with a girl in college at 18 or 19, I was likely exposed to the virus. The virus lay dormant in the crypts of my throat for decades. And so I didn't know, I didn't understand exactly what that meant at the time. I understood what that meant, but I wasn't sure what the laying dormant in the crypts of my throat part meant. And I will tell you what I learned because I decided that if I've never heard of this, and my summer job was taking the specimen from my dad's cancer surgeries to the dermatologist to have it read, like I was involved. If I've never heard of it, most people haven't heard of it. So I decided I'm going to go public and learn more about it. Well, one of my wife's friends says, why isn't he ashamed? And so it made me do even more homework. I did more homework, and this is what I found out. And this is why I'm on this podcast and why my cancer story, I don't know if you know, it's been shared in over 100 countries, spoken at two congressional briefings. Here's the deal. And I know you probably know it already, but many of your listeners maybe don't. 3 out of 4 adults by age 30 have the virus. 62% of freshmen in college. And in the last 4 years, tongue, throat, and tonsil cancer or pharyngeal cancer has surpassed cervical cancer and become an epidemic among men between 40 and 60. also impacting women. So my father's best friend, 2 years after I finished treatment, my father's best friend at age 73, having been married 50 years, got diagnosed with my same cancer.
Wow.
I will tell you this also, I've been married 29 years. My wife has never tested positive, ever. So I decide I'm going to go public. I'm going to learn this. And if you want to, and hopefully I can protect other people. If I'm talking too much, tell me because I'd like to go
No,
back.
no, no. You're. This is good. This is
Okay.
exactly. We can clip the heck out of this, and this
So
is
let
what.
me tell you this then.
Okay.
Let me tell you what happens if you end up getting diagnosed with this cancer, unless you already know. What happens is you end up with radiation oftentimes 5 days a week for 7 weeks. What that means is that your head is clipped down to a table, right? You're laying on your back. They put a mask, you have a mask made for your face that's keeps you in one place so the radiation only radiates what it needs to. For me, after 4 or 5 weeks, I ended up with saliva so thick I could not swallow it. I would go to sleep at night and it would cover my airway and I would wake up gagging and choking. I was gagging and choking 40 to 60 times a day from the saliva being so thick. I had open sores and third-degree burns in my mouth and throat, hence the feeding tube, because I couldn't swallow. And it was horrible. When I tell you it was horrible because radiation is the gift that keeps on giving. It's like having a sunburn on top of a sunburn on top of a sunburn. It was like someone shoved shards of glass in my throat and mouth. And that was after the radical tonsillectomy and neck dissection. I have, if you look on my website, I had a keloided scar that was pretty thick that ran down my neck. And I was in bed 18 hours a day for a month. I was sitting in the shower because I was too weak. So I bring all this up to you because one of the reasons I'm passionate is that a few weeks into this, I made videos to my 3 kids saying goodbye.
No.
Videos like, one day you're going to get married. I'm not going to be there. And this is what's important. And I made those videos over and over and over again, knowing that if they were the last things my kids ever heard from me, I wanted them to be perfect. And so all this goes back to the fact that, and one of the reasons I share my story is that there's a vaccine, the HPV vaccine, which is for boys and girls, not just girls, ages 9 and older, that can protect them from HPV preventable cancers, including oropharyngeal cancer, cervical cancer, penile cancer, vaginal cancer, vulval cancer. Um, did I leave out any of them? Penile cancer. I don't know if I said them all, but there's a lot,
Yeah.
including RRP, which I know this is about men, but RRP, I found I never even heard about it. And I've been doing cancer advocacy work a long time. And that is recurrent respiratory papillomatosis, which is when a baby's born with HPV in their throat. Guess how many surgeries, 2 women I know who I met recently at the National HPV conference, guess how many surgeries they had up like from birth to in their 50s?
No idea.
300 to 400.
Wow. Just removing the papillomas.
It was, I
Probably
never even heard of
probably
it. So
with a bronchoscope. Probably they go down into the lungs and remove the.
I don't know, but it
That's
was
amazing.
craziest thing. I'm like, if the vaccine can protect our sons and daughters and grandchildren from preventable cancer, if there was a vaccine that protected boys from prostate cancer or lung cancer or whatever, everybody would give it to their kids except the anti-vaxxers. But that's why we need to get the word out, and I appreciate you putting me.
Yeah, no, I find it very interesting, and there's definitely a lot of themes that continue to recur with our guests and with my clinic and this whole the whole men's movement podcast, and shame, guilt, being one of them, particularly shame and guilt surrounding sex, as if we just all miraculously popped onto the planet, through some immaculate conception,
Right.
this shame and guilt. Me, myself, I grew up Catholic, and, Catholic people definitely didn't have sex. Particularly the women certainly never had sex, all these immaculate conceptions. But, just that shame and guilt around sex, which is, it's a fundamental purpose and process that everyone goes through. Yet culturally, it's been so stigmatized and tabooed. Um, And like I said, especially, like I said, the men seem to hold a lot of the guilt on it or the blame and shame. He gave me HPV. Well, where did he get it from? So, and then, when you throw in cancer and oral pharyngeal cancer, it's once again, it's another thing that's typically, laden with shame and guilt about, well, he was a drinker, he was a smoker, you know, um, but these are common things. These are human things that, we all go through. We all have friends. We all, it's a part of life, so, for you to, one be stigmatized, one be afflicted with it, to have such a miraculous treatment of it, but then to be so bold and strong and brave to come out and, seriously, don't, I don't want you to shrug that off. That's huge, and, like I talked about, me and my story, my parents had, sexual relationships out of marriage, that were interracial in the 60s, so that shame and guilt is something that I've had to carry with me for years. And, my way to deal with it was, I wrote a book about it and I exposed it all. And, so I really fully appreciate, what you're doing. So thank you for that. And you're
Well,
right. Now we throw on the vaccine controversies of, that are going on, and this is another one that, the ramifications of the disease and the ability to protect it. And, it's wonderful. What have you learned? Like, tell me about this, going to Congress and, speaking to them about that. So that's kicking it up another notch to a different level.
There's a lot that I've been a part of. I've been fortunate to be included. And let me backtrack again just to tell you. So I'm known as, I'm not, I, I was trying to figure out how to say it, but I'm known as Superman HPV within the head and neck cancer world. And I'm not an arrogant jerk who thinks he's Superman. My friends called me Superman during chemo and radiation. And so I adopted the name, went public, launched a website, and an NBC News reporter was writing an article about the epidemic among men, called me and said, could she include my website within the article? And overnight, 500,000 people read the article, and my family ended up on NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt in 2017. So that kind of launched it even
Wow.
bigger. I started the website to provide inspiration and information for those diagnosed and or researching HPV, the HPV vaccine, and HPV related cancers.
Hmm.
And through that, and just getting the word out and trying to eliminate the stigma or reduce it, I've met some wonderful other people and advocating for the HPV vaccine for cervical cancer or anal cancer, different things. Um, I end up being connected with Congresswoman Castor's office because they have the Prevent HPV Cancers Act, which had bipartisan support, but didn't, they're still looking for a Republican co-sponsor, like a senator. Um, and so, but my two times I've been able to be one virtually, one in person, speaking about the Prevent HPV Cancers Act, it was really meaningful to me. Honestly, I'm going to make a little joke with you, but the people next to me were very impressive, right? You have like leading scientists, leading people from all these associations, and my placard said Superman HPV. Literally, it said that, like on the
Hey,
thing.
I think Superman outranks senators and congressmen for sure. So that's great.
You know what? It's been interesting to me. I always tell my wife I'm about to go like October 4th and 5th at UCLA. There's a survivor symposium. I serve on the national board for the Head and Neck Cancer Alliance. I'm also on the board of the HPV Cancers Alliance. But we are having a survivor symposium at UCLA. And I always think it's interesting. And I always tell my family, these doctors, I mean, they're wonderful. The Head and Neck Cancer Alliance doctors are fantastic. They care about their patients, but they are so much more educated than me. I mean, I'm smart. I graduated from college. I'm good. I run a family business, but the connection between the science and the humanity is the disconnect, right? A lot of the really smart people, while they have the science behind them, value my contribution on the story side because I do talk often about, I believe a parent's number one responsibility is to protect their kids. Well, if you can protect your kids from preventable cancer, don't you think you should at least speak to your kid's doctor about that?
Absolutely.
So I guess that's my 2 cents on that. I'm not sure I addressed your question, but just being able to share my story and take a time that was so brutally tough for me, my wife, and my kids and use it for good is what you know, leads
Yeah.
me forward.
Yeah, like I said, personally, I love that passion. That there's, I think, men in particular, but so we deal with men, so these are the things we talk about. But men in general, when it comes to expressing, signs of weakness, discussing health, discussing mental health, discussing cancer. I had an uncle. We all have these baby boomers, these World War II veterans, like he was diagnosed with a nodule on his lung and he just blows it off. And then, a year later, he dies of lung cancer. Like, who knew, that, men so neglect. And then even further, that even if they neglect themselves, if they go through something, they don't really talk about it a lot. There's not a lot of, men who are willing to come out and say, "Oh, hey, I had cancer," or "Hey, I did," they tend to hide it and keep it in beneath this armor shield that protects them from judgment. Go on, you're going to say?
I was just gonna say this, and I didn't mean to cut you off at all. Um, if anyone listening ends up with a bump on their neck that appears out of nowhere, or a sore in their mouth that's not healing, or an awkward feeling in the throat, I would immediately go see the ear, nose, and throat doctor. I can't tell you how many people, really confirming what you just said with your story. I know some people now that are going through, so it's HPV related oropharyngeal cancer, but it spread to their lungs. I know someone else where it spread from their lungs to their brain, so now they need gamma knife. And I had someone literally call me. I've had two people call me this week. I deal with patients all over the world, probably two to four a week. And I had someone call me earlier in the week and they're like, so and so's bones are breaking because the cancer got so bad and they never went and followed up with their doctor.
Oh,
Literally, they were like, did I do something wrong by not forcing them? Like, you can't make people
hmm.
take care of themselves, right? You need to give them the information and hopefully encourage them to go to a
No,
doctor.
right. No, but hearing stories like you that put a face to it. When you go see a doctor and the doctor tells you you've got cancer, it's this nebulous thing. It's this ghost behind the screen. But when you got a face that you can put to it. Jason Mendelson, is oh, hey, I saw this podcast. Hey, there's this guy I know. I saw this man on, and we'll include. I'd love to include a little snippet of you into our, experiences and to promote it on our podcast because
Thank you.
this is what this is what my guys need. This is what my patients, this is what I need, my friends need, a lot of the men that I deal with in life, that they need to hear these stories because, even if it's not necessarily HPV related oral pharyngeal cancer, it's like, oh, I had a nodule on my chest, I had a nodule on my testicle,
Right.
that just hearing these things from people, it destigmatizes it. And it's that, and we talk, like I said, the mental health aspect of things.
It's a
Um,
big deal. I was going to just tell
Dude.
you on your mental health piece, um, which I also have never said this on a podcast, but one guy contacted me a lot. He was having a hard time going through the treatment and he ended up committing suicide. And it is the only person in 11 years that I've ever dealt with. And I wasn't giving mental health advice. I was not his doctor, but he would reach out to me every so often. And I reached back out and I said, and I asked him how I was, and someone told me, "Hey, I'm so sorry. He, you know, committed suicide. He couldn't handle the treatment." And so I do think that you can be a strong man, father, business owner, whatever you want to be, but you need to be in charge of your health,
Mhm.
right? Whether that is getting your PSA, right, checked, whether that is going and having an annual checkup. I go every year on my birthday. Around that time, I go for full blood work twice a year. But I think being in charge of your health, and for me, I work out to inspire and encourage other people that there is a light in the darkness, that you can beat cancer and move on and become your strongest you. So
Yeah.
I think,
You may not be a physician treating patients, but you are saving lives. And I'm not using that as a cliche or a slogan. I believe it's true. The people that you touch, the people that you inspire. And you're right. These, the guys, in my experience, I've lost a number of friends over the years, colleagues. It's the last ones that you expect. It's the strongest guys, the guys that everyone goes to, for everything. It's like, oh, hey, he did my surgery. I'm going to that guy. He's the man. Well, I've lost a number of those guys because they don't have anyone to go to. Everyone goes to them. who do they go to? They go to guys like Jason Mendelson. That's who they go to.
I hope
So
so.
I think I said I think that's what you're doing, and you're doing it for a reason. So thank you.
So, Jason, what's the latest news that you want to tell your people out there about what you're doing for advocacy for HPV?
I'm headed to Bangkok, October 18th through the 27th. I'm speaking at the International HPV Conference. Last year I spoke in Edinburgh. Hopefully, my goal is to have my cancer story shared in as many languages as possible on all 7 continents to save lives worldwide. That's my thing. Just continuing to share my story, do podcasts with you, Neil, and just advocacy and discussing the importance of men taking care of themselves, being aware. Being aware. For this podcast, my thing would be bump on your neck that appears out of nowhere, open sore in your mouth that's not healing, awkward feeling, go see your ENT. And if you have boys and girls 9 and older, talk to their pediatrician about the HPV vaccine to protect them from a virus that 3 out of 4 adults by 30 have.
That's great. Definitely, yes. Jason and I are working together as Dr. Jack and I are working together again. The media giant community is growing in giant ways, in so many ways. So, Dr. Jack, best place we can connect with you is go where?
Well, we have a new website, but our first website is theultimatemensclinic.com. And we have another website that's now active called largernewbedford.com about our enhancement procedures.
Okay. All right. Well, appreciate it. All right. Thanks again. That was a special simulcast, the Neil Haley Show.